This leaves it for me to hand over to Sam, who is going to take us through the recent developments around the census, and then obviously we will open the session up to questions. So thank you very much, Sam.
Hi everybody, thanks Suze. For those who don't know me, my name is Sam Sullivan. I look after statistics and research here at Data Cymru. Like Sue said, we'll try to go through the first part of the session as quickly as possible to leave as much time at the end for your questions and answers with ONS. So just a very quick reminder for those of you maybe who are not all that familiar, what is the census? What are we talking about here today? Well, it's a national snapshot survey. Takes place every 10 years, and it aims to capture data from every household within England and Wales. So the last census was run last year during the pandemic. So census day was 21st of March 2021. And it was the first time that a digital first approach was undertaken. So that is most or the vast majority of the forms were done online. And the census overall impacts real world decision making, and we can get into some examples of that now. So it's a really, really important data source, underpins a lot of other data sources, so some secondary data sources. It's kind of the central plank of a lot of what we pick up and use. Considered to be a gold standard estimate of population in England and Wales, but it's important to understand that it's still an estimate. There's never been 100% response rate to a census. So there is a little bit of estimation going on in there, but it's a very, very good estimate. It's the best pretty much we've got, as close as we can be to this point in time. So right now, we've got a really, really good estimate of the population. As we get further and further away from census day, things change a little bit, but ONS has got a lot of publications, do a lot of work to make sure that the interim publications give us really good estimates of the population in the intervening periods as well. So how is census data used, particularly by local government? So census data affects financial settlements. So how much money each local authority receives is in part determined by its population, the size and the makeup of its population. We understand what that looks like in part using census. Planning for services, similarly, understanding who's in a particular area, what their needs are, again, is driven by a lot of census data. And emergency planning, so number of people who live in particular areas, again, and what that means for risk of flooding, fire, or other hazards. So understanding who people are, where they are. And representation. So it's a baseline against which we can kind of look at response to other surveys that we in local government may choose to do. So we can use the census as kind of a baseline. We can see how our representation marries up with that. Gives us a yardstick to measure ourselves against. And then modelling. So we use census data to underpin all sorts of things. The ones we're probably most familiar with, people in this session, population projections. They're kind of built upon census data. So yeah, quite a few uses there, all of them really, really important. So that's kind of just a bit of background. Why census? Why is it important? Why we're here today, I suppose. So the latest release was on the 2nd of November, looking at demography and migration data. So what was actually published on that day? Quite a lot of indicators. So I'm not going to go into them in detail, but you can sort of, I'll just leave this on the screen for 10, 20 seconds so you can get a feel for what came out on the 2nd of November. It's mainly looking at, like I say, demographic detail and migration details. On the left-hand side, we've got some demographic indicators, including sex by single year of age, and then onto household size, passport held, population density, etc. And on the migration side, age of arrival in the UK, year of arrival in the UK, country of birth, etc. We use pretty much all of this data, or a good chunk of it, in our own tools, and we make a lot of this available through Infobase Cymru, which is our bilingual tool, and it's all available via ONS and Stats Wales as well. So that's what came out on the 2nd of November. Okay, great. So what are some of the key trends in that data? What have we learned from that release? So the first bit on usual residents. So what is that? Who is a usual resident? So just to be clear, it's anyone who on census day, which was 21st of March last year, was in the UK and had stayed or intended to stay in the UK for a period of 12 months or more, and they had a permanent UK address. So who's that? So in Wales, that's 3,107,494 people. So that's our current best population estimate for Wales. And that is up slightly and increased slightly compared to 2011. So up 1.4%. So which local authority has the largest population? Well, that's Cardiff. That's the same as 2011. So we've had a slight increase there, 4.7% in the population of Cardiff, up 16,000 people, more or less, to just over 360,000. So similarly, the smallest local authority, Merthyr, again, it was the smallest local authority by population size in 2011. And there's been a very, very small change in Merthyr, just 37 people according to the counts, so 0.06%. So nearly 59,000 usual residents in Merthyr. So that's sort of the range we're looking at. Median age, we've now learned that the median age of the population was 42 years old. This is ever so slightly higher compared to 2011. We're 1 year up, it's 41 in 2011. So we've aged slightly, but that distribution isn't even across Wales. So we've got some local authorities with a slightly higher median age, and that's Powys, Conwy and Monmouthshire. And then those with the lowest are quite a lot lower. So Cardiff and Newport. Cardiff is a little way lower than everybody else at 34 years. So we've got a decent range in terms of the median age. So that's just a very quick snapshot. There's a huge amount more data available on usual residents. We just wanted to kind of highlight some of the key trends so you get a feel for what sort of stuff is available. So we've also got a lot of information on households. Sounds obvious, but what is a household? It has a specific definition. So it's quite a long definition. So bear with me 1 second if that's okay. So we've got a household is either one person living alone, or a group of people who are not necessarily related, but they live at the same address and share cooking facilities, a living room or a dining area. And a household must have at least one usual resident. So there's a specific definition. So how many households do we have in Wales as of Census Day 2021? Well, we've got 1,347,114. This is up. This is an increase of 3.4% compared to 2011. So interestingly, you'll note that number of households is up 3.4%. The population is up by 1.4%. So what we're saying there is we've got more households, or the rate of the increase in the number of households is higher than the rate of the increase in the population. So we've got more single person households potentially, or we've got households moving parts splitting up. So that could be due to a number of factors. It could be due to families splitting up. It could be due to an aging population and more people living alone. A number of things behind that, but we've got slightly different trends going on there. Same direction, but different rates. And then of these households, just to give a feel of what that looks like, nearly 2/3 are single family households. Nearly 1/3 are one person households. And then 5% are multiple family or other household types. That's a little bit different to 2011, but not a million miles away. So what does that look like at a local authority level? So we've got the largest average household size. So average number of people within each household. Cardiff and Newport are at the top with 2.4 residents per household. And then on the bottom end, in 2011, Cardiff was not at the top of the list. That was Flintshire, Merthyr, Caerphilly, but Newport was. There's not a lot of change in Newport, but we've got a slight increase in Cardiff. And then on the other end of the scale, in 2021, the local authorities with the smallest average household size was Conwy, 2.2 residents per household. And there's not a lot of change for Conwy, but Gwynedd and Powys have clearly average household sizes increased slightly since 2011 because they were towards the bottom of the scale then, towards the bottom of the range, I should say, sorry. So again, that's just a snapshot of what some of the household data says, what's available, and there's a lot more behind this, just to give you a feel for what's available. And then the third pillar, migration. So what are some of the key migration trends in Wales? So first thing probably to understand is that there were more deaths than births over the last 10 years. And therefore population growth in Wales was driven mainly by inward migration into Wales. So you can see that in some of the data here. So the percentage of usual residents born outside of Wales the proportion is 29.1% in 2021. That's up slightly compared to 2011, when the proportion was 27%. So 2021 compared to 2011, we've got more residents born outside of Wales as a proportion and as an absolute number. And so what does that look like in terms of usual residents who are then born outside of the UK? Similar trend. So we've got 6.9% of Welsh residents were born outside of the UK. Compared to 2011, that figure was 5.5%. And again, looking at the local authorities that at the ends of the range, what are we looking at? So the highest proportion of usual residents born outside of the UK is Cardiff, at 16.5% of all their residents. And the local authority with the lowest proportion is Caerphilly at 2.9%. Interesting that the neighbouring authorities fairly close together. Something behind that. Be really good to understand potentially from some of you in the room. If you can help us understand what's going on there, be really good to get your feedback on that. And the Isle of Anglesey was the only local authority in Wales where the percentage of usual residents born outside of the UK decreased. So in 21 out of the 22 authorities, that proportion increased, but in Anglesey it decreased by 4.9%. So again, just an overview. There's a lot more data in there. It's just to give you a flavour of what's available. And finally, the flip side of that is the local authorities that had the highest proportional increase in the number of usual residents born outside the UK were Newport and Flintshire. So they were up by 57 and 55% respectively. Bear in mind those figures are relative to the bases, so relative to the figure in 2011. Okay, so what are some of the differences in Census 2021 results compared to 2011? There's a new statistical disclosure control methodology, which I know colleagues from OLS will pick up today. And so what we can see at the moment is that some of the lower level geographic components don't necessarily sum to the higher level totals. This is by design, but just to give you an example, some things you may have picked up on when looking at the data. So for instance, if you compare population data at the Wales level, you have a total population of 3,107,494. If you then add up all of the single year age bands, you get a slightly different total, slightly lower. And if you sum that same data, so single year of age, across all of the MSOAs, so that's a statistical geography, one rung down from local authority, you get a total that's about 84 to 86 away from the other counts. So as you go down the statistical geographies, you get further away from that Wales level total. And just to kind of emphasize the point, the same thing happens on other breakdowns, and I won't go into those in detail. This is a slight change compared to 2011, where the data was internally consistent regardless of the geographic level you viewed the data at. So just a slight difference there, which I'm sure we'll pick up in the Q&A session. So one thing to bear in mind is the new approach will make it slightly more difficult to create these bespoke aggregations that you may want to pick up and combine data across geographies and breakdowns because you're dealing with different totals. So that's something to bear in mind and to work through. So we've had this conversation internally, and what we're doing is just making clear that this is something to be aware of and that the totals may not sum completely, but we put the caveat together and we put the caveat on all of our documents and on our info-based Cymru tool so that users are aware it's not wrong, it's just something to keep in mind. And so the last section from me, and then we can get into the Q&A, is what are the next steps? So what are we doing? What's coming out next? So specifically us, Data Cymru, what are we doing with census data? You can see one of our dashboards there. So we have, number one, produced a lot of bilingual data on our info-based Cymru tool. And we released a subset of updates on week before last, or was it last week already? I'm not sure. We commenced on the 7th, whenever that was. So we've now got a subset of the data available in English and Welsh for users, publicly available. We will we have a bilingual dashboard available, a snapshot of which you can see there. So that compares data from 2001, 11 and 21 censuses. That should be out at the moment, or if not, it'll be out this week. And that has, like you say, a subset of the data that's been released between June and now, and shows you how it's very, very easy to interact with. You can pull data directly from the dashboard, or you can pull it from our Infobase Cymru tool. So it's really, really intuitive and shows some of the key trends, and you can have a play with that. We put out a bilingual infographic on the armed forces data that was released last week. So I haven't really touched on any of that in this presentation, and I'm not going to. It's just so you're aware that's something else that's currently out there. And what we will continue to do for all future releases is update our dashboards with subsets of the data that are relevant. And we are producing a separate dashboard as well early December for the Welsh language release. It's coming out. So week commencing 5th of December. Towards the end of that week, we should be releasing our Welsh language dashboard. So that will show changes over time from 2001 to 2011, 2021, what's happening to Welsh language skills in Wales. And finally, we will continue to update our Infobase Cymru tool with bilingual data and metadata as the releases come out over the next few months. Oh, last one, most important one possibly, is we'll continue to work with local authorities and support them with any queries and outputs that you guys have. So we're here for all of that. Any questions, queries, anytime, we're available. And in terms of what is coming next then, and this is all available online. I have shamelessly pinched it and put it on these slides. So far, we've had the demography and migration release, which I've touched on today. And we've had the UK Armed Forces Veterans data, which came out last week. On the 29th of November, we've got data coming out on ethnic group, national identity, language and religion. And then early December, we've got the Welsh language data that I just referenced, and labour market and travel to work data as well. Then we got a nice break for Christmas, and then first week back straight into it. 5th of January, housing data, and then 6th of January, sexual orientation and gender identity. And then very early the following week, we've got education data. So we're talking about this morning. We're going to have a busy period as soon as we're back in January, getting all of that data together in the right format and pushing it through into our tools I just mentioned. And then we got a little break before health, disability and unpaid care data comes out on the 19th of January. All those dates are provisional, but they will be firmed up closer to the dates. So that's what we're working on at the moment. So down to you guys now to share, ask any questions. We will start to go through, I think, Sue's, the questions that have already been submitted, and then we've got a fair bit of time, half an hour or so, 35 minutes to pick up any and all questions.
Absolutely. Thank you for getting through that so quickly. That was really good. So thank you, Sam. As Sam says, for those that are watching on the video and won't have heard my introduction, we are really pleased to be joined by Liz McLaren and Ian Dove from ONS, who, along with Sam, are here to answer some of the questions now. And as Sam says, we've tried to leave as much time as possible for those questions. We have had some submitted prior to today's session, so I'm going to take those first, and then there are a couple in the chat that I can see so far, and obviously feel free to pose any more as we go along. So the first question that we have here, and Sam, I actually don't know, do you want to stop sharing and then you'll just be bigger on the screen? I was wondering, will the single year of age by LSOA ever be available? So I don't know who wants to come in on that.
That's a question for me. So that's under discussion at the moment. We have a similar question about why LSOA single year of age is considered disclosive or potentially disclosive in 2021, but it wasn't in 2011. Will we make single year of age data available at LSOA? And the answer is that in the intruder testing in 2021, we found some potential disclosure issues where we had detailed tables even with one variable, where you just had one variable at a low geography, but you had lots of categories. we had some potential identifications in our testing. We did the same sort of test in 2011, and we didn't have that last time around, so we didn't have any concerns in 2011. Why it's changed, I can't say for sure. It could be the data slightly different. It could be that the intruders that we hired to test were a bit better, or that the system made it easier for them to find. So we're not entirely sure, but we are going to make singular of age data available at MSOA. LSOA will have 23 categories, which is like 5-year bands and a bit more detail for younger ages, I believe. Whether we'll have single year of age at LSOA is under discussion based on the risk versus the research need. So it's under discussion at the moment.
Thank you very much. So you've covered the first two, so that was very well done. The next question we had through was, when will the data related to Welsh language use be released? I assume that's the question we've answered further up in the chat, which is 6th of December.
Yes, that date's been confirmed now. Yeah, it was confirmed last week, so that's definitely on track for 6th of December.
Excellent, thank you very much.
And just to say, obviously, the Welsh Government are leading on the bulletin for this release. ONS will be releasing the data and what we call a headline release, so we're just going to be releasing a few bullet points linking to the Welsh Government website, given it's obviously they kind of got the policy experts on this, so they're producing the bulletin for us.
Excellent, thank you very much. So next question is, I've been accessing Census 21 information on the ONS website to see if I can find median and mean age analysis at local authority level. Is the analysis available, or is it something which will be published in the future? It is complex to calculate from the frequency tables provided.
Yes, we haven't released median age by local authority at the moment, so I'll put a link in the chat for that. So that was released as part of our demography and migration release. And again, it's something we'll be looking at what we might provide later on as well. Obviously, the flexible table builder system that we are going to be using doesn't do calculations, so it can't do things like averages or means or medians, etc. So that's something we're exploring with the NOMIS team, who obviously the NOMIS team can do calculations. So it might be something we're talking to them about, is whether they host that sort of thing in there.
Thank you very much. I think a lot of these questions are perhaps unsurprisingly on a theme, so I'm just going to ask them, but obviously please feel free to kind of reference previous answers if it is relevant. So the next question we've got is, why is the data not as robust as it was in 2011? Different population household data for LAs depending on what data set you're looking at, for example.
Yeah, so I've grouped that with how do you recommend we explain the variance in what seems to be the same count, but doesn't match from table to table, even at UTLA level. The example, they give an example of different local authority counts from different tables, although they, in theory, should be the same number. Yeah, they gave the example 6 North Wales Unitary Authority areas. So as Sam outlined in the slides, we're using a different disclosure control method this time around. The main form of protection is still the record swapping, but we're also applying perturbation, or what we call cell key perturbation, which is where we make small changes to the individual counts. The reason we do that is to protect against differencing, where you have two similar tables that are very similar, but they are different slightly, and you combine them to try and identify people. And we're adding more protection, which is causing these differences, because when you add up the perturbation or the bits of noise that we've introduced, then you get different totals of noise because it's a semi-random process. We have some details on the website, which I don't have the link to, but I'm sure we can link in the chat or afterwards, which explains the method. And the overall reason why we're doing this method, and we knew it would cause small differences between totals, is to allow us to release more flexible outputs and to release data from a flexible dissemination system. So when we do get the flexible dissemination system, the users can choose which classifications they want to break the table down by, whereas in 2011 we had sort of one version of each table. you can only use, you can only have 8 categories or you can have 14. Under a flexible system, we can give the users the choice of how many categories they want to break down by. So overall, we're sort of adding more protection to the data this time around, which is going to cause these small differences in totals. And the reason is so that we can provide more data overall. So it is a bit of a trade-off, but it's one that we're very optimistic will be overall beneficial to users. They'll have more data to look at, even though there'll be small differences. How you can explain them, I would say, is it's because of what we've done in terms of disclosure control. It's because of the perturbation. They are also they are small differences proportionally, very small at local authority level. They're well within the sort of confidence of what we think the number is. These are very good estimates, but they're never precise to 1 or 2 people. So they shouldn't affect the analysis, and they shouldn't prevent you from doing any analysis. And if you understand where the differences come from, hopefully that's not a concern, and it should be explainable.
Okay, thank you. Sam, did you want to come in?
Yeah, that's really, really helpful. Thank you very much. That's really, really helpful. I'm no methodologist whatsoever. So from a completely outside, naive perspective, why can the perturbation not be neutral? So we have a net zero impact across the levels. What do I not understand? Probably quite a lot. Could you explain that for us?
Yeah, that's fine. We did get that question. I guess it wasn't from this group, but we got it separately. So overall, the perturbation is neutral. We add as much positive noise as we do negative noise, and overall it cancels out. But within a single table, there's a random element. So some tables by chance will have more positive changes than they will negative. And so if you take one table in isolation and add up all the individual values, then there will be a slight change between a total and a different table, which happens by chance. We did consider an alternative method which did the same thing, and then it went over the table and sort of said, okay, now I'm going to fix it so that all the totals add up again. But basically what it would be doing is it'd be adding the perturbation and then doing a second round of perturbation to make sure that all the totals were as they were before. What we found was that that was much more perturbation. It was much more noise and it made a lot more changes, which we didn't think were worthwhile. What it also did was it lost a different kind of consistency. So if you have 2 tables in our system and 2 cells have the same people in them, they'll get the same noise. So if you have 4 people in this table, they'll get a +1, for example. And if you get the same 4 people anywhere else in the data, they'll still get the same +1. If we did the second round adjustment to restore the additivity, then we can't do that because we don't know what we need to do for additivity for other tables. So essentially, it was a lot more noise. The amount of noise we add is what we call a light touch. We don't think it's significant enough to affect analysis or research. And the alternatives would be more noise, which we think would be more damaging.
Thank you very much. I know that's it's obviously a topic that is causing some people some concern, I think.
So yeah, it's a change from 2011.
Yep.
In 2001, we did small cell adjustment, which was a more extreme version and led to the same sorts of issues. But in 2011, we just did record swapping. So this is a change from there. We have been planning for it for some time, and we think overall it's going to bring a lot of benefits in terms of releasing more data, and we are optimistic of that. But obviously it is a change, and we didn't have differences in totals in 2011. So we know that we need some communication, and we're happy to explain, what's going on and why we thought we had to do this.
Thank you. I can see that there's a hand up. If we have time, Janine, I will bring you in, but there's a couple more questions we've got to cover first. So if in the meantime you want to add a question to the chat, we can address it through that function, or like I say, if we've got time at the end, I can bring you in. So I think this is again all now kind of around the same theme, and surprisingly. So the next question is, how will data interrogation tools such as NOMIS deal with the perturbation when the custom geographies are being built. It's quite concerning that the most useful function of small area data, i.e. the ability to build bigger geographies from it, might be stymied by the disclosure control method that you've chosen.
Yeah, so I'm not entirely familiar with how the interrogation tools will work, but the perturbation will be consistent. So if you ask for bespoke geographies, you'll get the same perturbation each time. You'll still have the ability to group together smaller geographies, and you'll have the estimates for bespoke geographies. What we recommend is that you group together the larger geographies where possible and try to use the classifications that are most relevant, or the geographies that are most relevant. So if you're looking at local authority data, we recommend that you ask for local authority data rather than building smaller geographies like MSOAs and adding them together. But it won't prevent you from using bespoke geographies, but there'd be a note of caution that you will have perturbation added, so you'll have the same differences in totals between different tables. And if you are grouping together different tables, then you're also grouping together perturbation, and the effect will be larger for the more cells that you add together. So if you add together 100 cells, that's like 100 chances of perturbation, although we perturb a small fraction of that. And if you add together 1,000 cells, then that's, it will have roughly 10 times as much perturbation. So we recommend aggregating at the closest level possible, but it won't prevent analysis of grouping smaller geographies than that. They should still, it will cause differences, but they should still be slight. They shouldn't affect the research results.
Thank you very much. There's a lot of chatter in the chat going on as well, just for everybody to be aware of. If you're on the video, I suspect you can't see it, so we'll try and cover as much as we can. Okay, so the next question was small area population structure data is one of the most anticipated data sets. Why was this not included in the topic summary release? And I think that's referring to single year of age. I believe. Yeah. Yes, okay.
This is on my list. I'm not sure if Liz maybe has a better answer, although more age data will be available in a flexible dissemination environment. And the topic summaries are like a subset of what we think should go first. So we do have age 101 categories at MSOA, I believe, and we have age 91 split by sex at local authority. So there will be more age data available in future, although not everything is released at the moment.
Okay. And I, so that I don't truncate the full question, the follow on to that was, I get that single year of age may be disclosive, but quinary groups or the 2011 KSA key stage age structure would have been appreciated.
Yeah, so we're not blocking grouped age for disclosure reasons. I think they're just not this early in a release, and they'll come later. We will have age 23 categories at output area level, which is mostly 5-year bands, and some smaller groups for younger ages, and 5-year bands at like 70 plus.
Thank you very much. So the last question that was posed came in this morning, so I'm afraid you haven't seen this. And it says, are you going to be releasing the 2011 census data on the new ward and LSOA boundaries so that we can compare changes between 2011 and 2021?
That's a good question. I don't think we have plans to do that yet. It would be something that we'll do after, once we've got through the busy period of 2021 data. The main consideration for us is whether the boundary changes are too small. So if an LSOA is very, very similar to 10 years ago, but with just a small difference, the issue that my team would have is if we release the previous version and the new version, and the difference is, one household, for example, is probably going to be a small group of households. But if the differences are very small, then they're not, arguably they're not that much to analyze, but they're also potentially would isolate small groups of households or individuals. So if there are very similar geographies, then we might not be able to do that. It's not on the plans at the moment, but it is something we'll consider. And I'll turn to Liz in case she wants to correct me.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Ian said. I think you do need to consider. Obviously, the priority is to get the 21 geographies out, and then obviously if there's other user needs out there, we have to consider these disclosure control elements before we make any final decisions.
Actually, a note on that. So I'll be concerned about the small differences. That wouldn't prevent us from doing some very basic analysis, like how many people are in there or split by sex, but we wouldn't be able to get all the data for the old boundaries and the new boundaries, because then you could get a difference.
Yeah, thank you very much. So those are all the pre-posed questions. We've got some now, and I'm going to work through them in order. So I may call on people to clarify what they've meant, because obviously these were raised at certain points within the discussion. And I can see that, Liz, you've been replying to some as well. So for those who are on the video, I will kind of just touch on both the questions and answers where they have been dealt with. So the first question raised was, will there be data available for population with a disability? And Liz's reply to say yes, in the health, disability and unpaid care release, which will be available provisionally on the 19th of January. So hopefully that one's been covered. Carol Ann has asked, why has this been changed? Can I ask you, Carol Ann, to just given obviously that the conversations move on, can you maybe add a clarification at the bottom of the chat just to say what you're talking about in terms of changed, and we'll deal with that question then. I'm really sorry. So then I tried to access the next question. I tried to access some MSOA level armed forces data a few days ago and found that it is not available on the main ONS census page. I was able to find it via NOMIS, but I thought all the data would be accessible from the main census page. I don't know if that's
I can cover that. So again, that was the aim, was to have one place to go for everything. There has been sort of resourcing issues on the publishing side, and they haven't so not everything's quite as where it should be. And we've also had, some people may have noticed that the way we've got the data sets at the moment is just as Excel downloads, which is not what we've sort of showed in some of the webinars, etc., where we were showing a page where you can download different formats, etc. So there was some technical issues that had to be resolved. So that is hoping that everything is going to be going live towards the end of this month. So we will be re-releasing demography, migration and veterans with the new formats. So and then hopefully that will give more formats for people to download data, and it's a more user-friendly experience in terms of there's going to be basically one data set page for each data set, and people can go on to it and just choose which geographies they want, download what, and they can also filter in terms of if they just want a certain region, output areas for one region or something like that. So that will be available later in the month. And in terms of getting the census hub pages, I've been told by my publishing colleagues that that's probably not all going to be working as well as it should be until closer to Christmas due to their resourcing challenges. But yes, we recognise that the journey from the front page of the ONS website is not the best at the moment. But hopefully we'll get that working properly over the next 4 weeks or so.
Okay, and I think that the follow on from that question, possibly reading through the chat, is will that also include the LSOA level data? I think that's the follow on.
Well, what we've released at the moment is a mix. Yeah, obviously we're trying to go down to output area level as much as possible, but obviously due to the reasons Ian's outlined, we've got some data sets that only go down to MSOA, and there's a few that only go down to local authority. In terms of LSOA data, obviously once we've got the flexible table builder going out in the new year, people can select the LSOA geography, but obviously due to the rules that Ian's been talking about, people may or may not get, depending on what they want. There's obviously lots of different possible combinations. So depending on what people request, they will get LSOA data or they won't, depending on whether it passes the disclosure checks.
Okay, I'm very conscious of the hands that we've got up. I will try and get to you guys. So then we had, when can we expect to see a release for national parks? And that's during phase 3.
Yeah, so
will there be
basically we're trying to
data-
get the
sorry.
main geographies done, and some of the more sort of lesser used geographies will be in our phase 3.
Thank you. Will there be data available on armed forces veterans at LSOA level?
I might turn to Ian for this one, but at the moment we've only got MSOA level, and I think that's univariate, so I suspect there won't be anything at LSOA level, Ian.
I need to check actually. Could we? I might be able to look it up, but
yeah, I'm just
I
wondering.
think we'll get back to you on that one.
If we collapse that classification, it might be more acceptable for SDC, but yeah, that's something we can work through. But at the moment, we've only released down to MSOA level.
Right, okay. And then somebody was asking for clarity on whether the single year of age data will be available by LSOA from yourselves.
So it's not available at the moment,
Yeah.
and we're not sure if we'll make it available. It's under discussion. So at the moment, we've got singular of age at MSOA and above. At LSOA and OA, we've only got age in 23 categories. Whether we do singular of age at LSOA, we're discussing at the moment because we had some in intruder testing, we had some potential identifications, although we have to balance that against the use as well. So that's under review at the moment.
Next question. Is there a reason why the unrounded data released on the 2nd of November didn't include a total usual residence at LA and LSOA?
I can answer that.
Yeah, thanks.
I think that's because we were planning to have the flexible dissemination website available. Under the flexible system, you can choose just to have the geography or to try and add more variables or take variables away in phase 2. So we were expecting that to be available from the flexible website. And so we didn't do them as separate topic summaries because you can already get it. So that will be available, although not until we've got the flexible website available.
I think as a general principle, the way the flexible system works, it doesn't include totals. Is that right, Ian, from memory?
Yes, it doesn't include totals. So if you'd like totals, you have the choice of adding together the numbers that you have and getting the sort of sum of internal sales, or you can request it in a flexible system. You can request the totals as a separate table, and those will have less perturbation. They won't match your original table, but they'll have less perturbation. So if you prefer accurate totals, you can ask for them separately, or if you prefer consistent totals, you can add together the cells that you're using.
Okay, thank you. There's a lot of comments then. I think obviously the two key issues for people are the perturbation and the issues that brings with some of the totals and the aggregations, and obviously the geographies as well. And there's a lot of comments here about actually that ward boundary data would be very, very useful. Obviously, following the elections, there were a lot of new wards created, or in line with the elections, there were a lot of new wards created at which we don't actually have the data at the moment. So ward boundary level data would be really, really useful. So requests to focus on that.
Yeah, so we are working on putting a calendar entry out to announce the date for the ward geographies. It's looking like going to be early next year, and I think we've got agreement, Ian, haven't we, that basically anything that we've got at MSOA level, we're happy for it to go out at ward level.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, I mean, a lot of the work we do at first on the statistical hierarchy, and then we do it for the more alternative geographies afterwards, and wards we are working on, which will be part of the health and care release, I believe.
Yeah, so basically we're working on putting everything that we've published so far for the topic summaries. Everything will be re-released, providing the ward geography alongside the very last topic summary.
Thank you. Only a couple more left, and then I will bring our speakers in. Are you able to comment on how large a change perturbation makes compared to the survey uncertainty? Presumably it changes from table to table, and tie in this kind of information to each table could give users more confidence when they're using the data.
That's a good question. We we haven't given anything that specific, and the reason it is that, yeah, from table to table is quite different. The main factor is how many cells you're adding together. I would say that on one table, it is very minimal. So most of the changes are changing a cell by 1 or 2. I mean, if you're a local authority, if you're using local authority data, it's negligible, and it's certainly within the confidence of the survey, because you don't know for sure that it's exactly 101 people rather than 100, 102. If you're adding together multiple cells, then it sort of stacks up, and it depends how many cells you're adding together. But we have done research that showed that it was a smaller impact than other factors, than general uncertainty, and the non-response of 2 or 3% or whatever it was for each area is a smaller impact than that. So statistically, it doesn't affect the estimates as much as other factors, although obviously it depends how many cells you're adding together and how big the numbers are. So if you have very low counts, then proportionally the changes are quite large, even though you're only adding 1 or taking away 1. So generally, I'd say that it's very small, although I'm sure that's not the answer you were looking for. But we, yeah, there is more that we can look into. But if you want to, you can email us with specific tables, and we can give you some insights on that. Although it's very hard to say without the exact table, because it is different from case to case. The other thing I'll mention is that we add more perturbation to the small counts because we think they're a higher risk, and the larger counts we add less perturbation to, which is another thing that complicates it from that point of view. But it's also a factor that means if you're using larger geographies or bigger counts, the impact is smaller. And if you're using more detailed tables with small counts, the impact is larger.
Thank you. So when will the grouped age data be available for LSOA?
Yes, that will be when the flexible table builder becomes available in the new year, in early next year.
Excellent, thank you. Caroline has confirmed that we've answered her question, so we don't need to go back to that one. Thank you, Caroline. So if you can only get totals from adding cells in the flexible tables, aren't you building in problems with the perturbation?
Just looking at that question. How high up is that question?
Right at the end. No, it's last but one comment, and then I will. It's from Janine, and I will let Janine in a minute then to.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you want to expand on what sort of problems you mean. There are 2 ways of getting the totals. So our advice is if you're working on one table and that's your focus, then I'd recommend that you use the totals from that table and add up the cells that you're using. And if you're using multiple tables, then you can request the totals as a separate table. And that's probably not very clear with me just saying it. But as an example, if you're looking at age by sex, in a flexible website, if you're splitting age cross-tabulated with sex, if you want the totals, you could add them together, the cells that you have, or you could request just age, and the just age table will be the totals for age. And then you could request the sex table. So then you get the totals for sex. If you want more accurate totals or totals with less perturbation, then I would request the tables independently. Alternatively, you could add together the cells that you have for age split by sex. So the users have both options. That's in a flexible system, which we don't have for the earliest releases, but we will have next year. So there should still be options for users on how they want to approach the data.
Okay, thank you very much. And I have promised that I will bring Janine and then Vicky in. So Janine, and Vicky, you should both now be able to unmute and turn your camera on if you wish to. Obviously, you don't have to turn your camera on, but yeah, Janine, if you want to come in first.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring, first of all, I want to raise an issue that I'm not sure. I had tech problems at the start, so I wasn't able to get in until about 12. But I'd just like to say that the way the data, I know that you said that there have been issues about your resource to upload the data, but can I say that there's been a massive impact on the resource that everybody else in the whole country has had to use in order to download the data in the way that you've presented it, instead of it being available in nice, for each individual univariate data piece of data, you might have had to download up to 9 tables in order to get all of the data for your area. And if 22 local authorities are doing that, rather than it having been available in 1 or 2 nice spreadsheet tables like it was last time round, that's an absolute massive resource that is being inefficiently used across the whole country. I'm hoping that you're going to have this sorted before the 29th of November, when we have the big and very popular download of all that identity data, when everyone's going to be wanting to scrabble to get that, because you'll have had free sites and stuff will be in the news. Our councillors, our officers will be demanding that data from us on that day that it's released in the news. And if it's only going to be available, it takes me all day to download the data and collate the data and start pulling the data out before I can even start looking to see what it actually means. So
yeah, no, totally agree. And we're not happy ourselves with these delays.
And then the other thing is, I'm really concerned about perturbation. I've been working with censuses since the 1981 census, and perturbation at the cell level caused absolute nightmares in 1991, particularly for small areas, for complicated data sets. We were ending up with things like 135% of our population being Welsh speakers. So I hope that that kind of fiasco isn't going to happen again. The notion of a 1-number census was fantastic. The same number in every table just made our life easier, even though we knew there were issues with some of the data. The fact that we had that one population figure, that one household figure across an area, whatever table you were looking at, increased the utility of the data, and also the confidence that non-statisticians had in the data. Because I think that 6 different variations on the population at unitary authority level is going to be a nightmare to explain to our councillors, and it will undermine the confidence they have in the data. So those were just the 2 main points I wanted to make. Most of the questions that you read out came from me as well, and I'm on the census user group. So if anyone else has any other questions, get in touch with me, and I'll try and raise those at the census users group that we've got next month.
Thank you very much, Janine. Vicky, if you want to come in, you should also be able to unmute.
Yeah. Do you want us to come in?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry,
yes, of course you can. Sorry.
So, Janine, just in terms of the data, obviously, we're not happy that the systems haven't been delivered that we were expecting, and we are trying to work on that as much as possible and get that moving. In terms, the data is all available in Nomus. I don't know whether you'd find that a better way to download the data, and their API is also available. So I don't know whether that's a better alternative at the moment until we've got the ONS website at full capacity.
And my last point that I just wanted to make was MSOA. Nobody at unitary authority level in Wales really uses MSOA. It's a meaningless geography for us. So there's no point you saying that data, if that data is not available at LSOA, it's probably not going to be used at a small area level for lots of local authorities.
Thank you. And Vicky, we've probably got just enough time to bring you in as well, if you can.
Yeah, just wanted to support everything that Janine has said. You know, as sort of expert users of all this data, you know, we've kind of gone along with what we've been told, and we've been reassured along the way that things would be ready and, you know, our needs would be met. Currently, they're not, in all honesty. And, you know, I'm sorry to sound negative, but it's the truth. You know, the news is out there that certain things have been published, like the Armed Forces data, but then when it sits in a completely different part of the website, it's just not helpful. You know, we were told there'd be one system to access all of this data. Currently, there isn't. I understand that, obviously, as you say, you've had issues as well. But I think the difficulty is that, you know, we're being asked to analyze this data, which we can't easily access at the moment. And, you know, if you're saying that we're not going to get the flexible data part of it until, you know, the new year, you know, we're not going to get ward level data easily accessible until your last release, which I can't remember from what you'd said was, you know, but much later down the line, effectively. So it makes
that's
it
only
really,
January, so it's not that far away.
but it does make it really, really difficult when we are being, as Janine said, kind of pestered by councillors and leaders of or authorities to provide this data, and it just doesn't, it's not available in an accessible form at the moment, you know, and that's just, you know, the data itself, without all the other problems that Janine has mentioned already about, you know, perturbation and tables not agreeing to the same totals and things. So it's really unfortunate. It's not looking all nice and shiny at the moment. All this new data, I think we've got some significant concerns, which I'm not quite sure what the outcome is going to be, if I'm honest, at this point.
Thank you, Vicky. We have actually reached our time. So Leslie, I'm so sorry. I've seen that you've put your hand up, but I am going to have to draw the session to a close, I'm afraid. But obviously, if you put your comments into the chat, we will still be able to access those. Liz or Ian, did you want to come back on what Vicky has said?
Yeah, again, I'll just reiterate. I mean, we are aiming trying to get the ONS website up to full capacity as soon as possible. At the moment, I think NOMIS is the best alternative to get data out quickly and use their API. But we hope to have the whole ONS website working a bit better by the end of this month, in time for the next topic summary.
Absolutely. So there are a couple more questions, but what we'll do is we'll tackle those now after the session, because it is 1 o'clock and we do need to draw this to a close. So it just remains for me to thank everybody for their contributions, in particular Sam, Liz and Ian, and thank you to all of you for joining. Hopefully you found it a useful session. As I say, we will look at the questions that have remain unanswered, and we will tackle those after the event and get those responses out to you as well. So just to say thank you very much. We can still see the comments, and I hopefully once we log off from here, we'll still be able to. And so thank you very much, and we will hopefully see you at the next webinar session.